to get it into the repository, which is, I have to admit, a little unintuitive because you would think install means something else. But generally, when you're thinking of install, you're thinking of putting it someplace where you'll use it, which actually in Maven terms is really deploy. In this case, the install phase is referring to actually getting this artifact installed into the repository, which in this case is the local repository. You can see that it ran through the whole thing and got it in. And so now the latest version is in the repository, and you're able to access it from your ecom CSV, which we've been running into a lot because REST service or REST servlet also requires ecom data, and every time there's a change, it's easy to forget to reinstall the data project, at which point your build will start failing in REST servlet. So that's something to kind of watch out for. So that's kind of the overview of what's going on, and kind of a taste of what's possible. What I really like to do now is sort of get an idea of what everybody is experiencing out there from an actual practical perspective. What issues are you dealing with? What hurdles would you like to overcome? And that way we can get an idea of how we can better gather these projects together and use Maven to really streamline our development process going forward. So I'm going to unmute everybody's microphone. So if you're having an embarrassing conversation, that would be the time to stop. Okay.
So I guess my problem is that, it seems like a lot of work. I mean, we got to check out 6 projects, and I don't know how it really streamlines any sort of process, but in a way, we also deal with downtime on the DOL side when the server needs to build or do whatever. So I see the benefit, but I also see the pain where, like, now I'm scared to update because, basically if you're not online and I can't build and do anything, I can't develop. So that causes downtime. So, I see both sides of it, and it's difficult.
Okay. So you're saying that because we've got the projects spread out over different places, independent projects kind of out on their own, things are more confusing than they need to be?
Well, I'm foreign to Maven as well as probably, 90% of the team, and, I don't know the steps to resolve errors or anything like that. So, I'm left in la-la land to wonder. When I know how to develop and focus on that, it's one more thing that it's like, well, I don't know what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it does slow it down.
Ben, can you maybe show us what we should do if that happens, like if the dependencies change and then we do an SVN update or something, and project breaks? Can you maybe walk us through that process?
Yeah, sure. Hold on. Let me. I've got a project I've been testing things in, which actually has everything set up in version. So.
And if I can just interject real quick. So Axel, I mean, I realize, and I guess this really kind of goes out to everybody because I've had my own problems with a lot of these Maven switchovers, but I think it was really key that we did make this change because, we went from 2 massive projects to, a bunch of little projects. Us bringing HTML online really forced us to kind of reconsider how we have things structured. And so these are some painful changes now, but long term, they're really going to help us. The other thing is, as far as Maven versus Ant, I mean, if you look at the Ant builds, it took months to get those fine-tuned and squared away. And Maven does everything and then some in a much more efficient manner. So I realize it's kind of painful, but it's things that we'll appreciate once it's all there.
And plus, let me share a quick screenshot of just something that I've been looking at. Now, this is, if you haven't read the whole article up to, or the whole chapter up to this point, this is a little confusing. But what essentially you're looking at is a structured project. Essentially, you know, the corporation itself has a POM that everything that everything would depend on. That would include stuff from us, just you know, the repositories that you need to have access to, and special properties that everybody needed. We could even put in the developers that work for, you know, us, or which teams. You can even establish permissions with that. I mean, it's amazing what you can actually do with all this. But then, as you can see here, it kind of steps down to the, you know, big system, which is this would be what we would tell Jenkins on the production server to build. And from there, everything would kind of flow out. And so Maven would know how to put this whole thing together, because each of these little projects would have their POMs set up correctly. But you know, us as developers, we hopefully never actually have to look at the big system. It's just that if you're working on the web portion, like you know, some people are, like, you know, Axel, you know, you'd just be checking out this particular portion of the project, and you'd only have to deal with these two projects that are under it. But because you checked out this, it knows how to properly set these things up. And so you've got, there's a lot of places we can go with this, and we're sort of still transitioning all this stuff out because we're trying to iron out the actual practical details of what we're doing. So that's why I appreciate your frustration a lot, and, you know, keep letting us know what isn't working. But
yeah, I'm not saying, you know, I don't want to use it or it's not good. I've certainly been on other projects in the past. Enterprise level stuff definitely uses Maven, and there's got to be a reason they do it. So are we not doing any of is the Flex build still done with Ant, and then our deployment is now done with Maven?
actually, reverse that. It's the build is being done with Maven, and the deploy is being done with Ant. So, but that's because Lifecycle doesn't have a Maven. It doesn't have a Maven plugin, so we've got to revert to Ant to get these things inside the containers.
Yes, the is officially happening as a Maven build, but there's a pre-step in there
that it executes some Ant, right?
Yeah, all the Swifts and modules are still built with Ant because that stuff just doesn't exist in Maven.
Right. I figured there was something like we had set up in Maven to execute our Ant scripts, and then Maven would, you know, do our deployments to different servers or whatever it does. It seems.
Yeah. So the job that Maven is serving for us as far as the econ project is, it'll take the generated WAR and install it into the local repo so that it's available for the ARI ecomp-html project.
Okay, explain what a WAR is.
A WAR is just it's just a zip file. It's just a zip file with web assets. I mean, it's really no more complicated than that.
Okay.
Yeah, and stuff like Tomcat and all of the Java servers know how to unpack WARs and how to deploy them correctly. So it's
is
a
it
way
like
to
it's a package, but then it also has, is it like destination? So like when it unzips it, it puts it in certain places?
depending on how you set it up, yeah.
Okay, and then the other day we were talking about basically almost like symbolic links on the server, and I think you said we could handle that with a WAR or an ear. I can't remember which one it was. You know what we were talking about with the modules? Not you, Ben, but Mike.
Okay, so a WAR is simply a collection of files that gets deployed. An ear normally will contain multiple WARs. So for example, we have an ecomp HTML ear. And within that ear, we have 2 WARs. One is the HTML code base, and one is the Flex code base. And
Okay.
so there's within an ear, there's an application XML file that essentially says, this is what I contain, and this is where I'm located. And so that ecomp HTML ear is just dumped into, the root of whatever web server you're running. And that XML file within it says, okay, load the Flex WAR at the /ecomp HTML /flexapp context. And then ultimately the ecomp HTML WAR is loaded up at ecomp HTML. So essentially you could have 5 WARs all loading from different locations. And the ear just allows you to package and dictate where things are.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and these are all just specific to Java servers. And it's just, the J2EE standard and how these things work.
Gotcha.
Okay, so let me just run through a quick checkout of the project and then how to update, get the new updates and then put them in place. So the whole thing starts with new project. Most things do. In this particular case, you can just hit new project. Once you have Maven for Eclipse installed, which kind of have to do, but that's not difficult. It's just in the Eclipse marketplace. You can actually just check out Maven projects from SVM, which makes the whole thing really easy. When your first time through, you're going to have to get this version connector, but I already got it. And at this point, it's the same that you guys are used to. Just browse to your location. Okay, ecomp HTML. I'm going to pause here for just a second to point something out. Normally, what happens normally when you want to work with you check out the DOC. And when you want to work on the document or the documentation, you just click, check out the documentation. But because we wanted to eliminate a lot of what the problems I'm about to show you within the ecomp build itself, we created a structure that Maven understands that Eclipse really doesn't know anything about, and that is the whole module and nested project. So as you can see, the client web, the REST servlets are all here under ecomp HTML, and these are for real projects in and of your own right. And if you were just wanting to work on the REST servlet itself, you could check this out, and it's a real project that would come in. But because we want to have the environment set up, we're going to click out the parent project, which, if you remember, the one from before, it's essentially at this point what we're doing is we're checking out all of this in this diagram. So just hit finish, and then the normal thing where you have to wait for the whole thing to come out, which of course takes forever, but I didn't delete the file, so they should still be there. It hopefully won't take too long. Oh, this is some exhilarating presentation action right now, huh? I'm even watching a console output.